Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Pulse with BP. I'm your host, Billy Parvatam. Folks, I'm so excited today to be joined by Coach Kevin Curtin, my ninth grade high school freshman year history teacher at George C. Marshall High School. He's also a basketball coach, coached women's basketball back in the day, and lacrosse, big Rams fan. And for the third straight third straight Super Bowl, he joins me to recap the Super Bowl between the Chiefs and the 49ers and talk so much more about football and big picture. Coach, thanks so much for joining me. Always a pleasure.
Billy, it's great to be on here. Love, love, love. If we're not going to have a Rams win the Super Bowl, we get to have the 49ers lose the Super Bowl. That's what it's all about. It's been a great week here at the Curtin House.
Well, let's get right to it then, Coach. But before we get to talking to the Super Bowl, I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't talk about briefly the unfortunate shooting that happened during the Super Bowl parade in Kansas City. Obviously, you think about it. Obviously, you're happy for that city to come together, have just an opportunity to celebrate their Super Bowl win. But unfortunately, it's marred by tragedy. I was looking at the latest updates before we hopped on here. Unfortunately, it killed a local DJ, the shooters, and injured more than 20 people, including children. And, unfortunately, it seems like this is pretty commonplace, what's been happening in America over the last really decade, but I feel like it's been exasperated the last few years. What were kind of your thoughts on that? I just feel like something we should touch on before talking about the game.
Yeah, it's you're appreciative of the people that hopped on. The videos that I've seen is it looks like some folks from Kansas City hopped on the shooters and were able to contain them until the police arrived. But the fact that we go to the Fourth of July parade around here and we're looking around and it's just I'm able to say this because I'm not at school. I am just not a gun guy. I don't get it. I don't get the appeal to it. I'm not. I you know uh I think the Second Amendment meant something different when it was created a couple hundred years ago. And so I know that's not everybody doesn't agree with me on that, but all the shootings that take place in this country is um it's a tragedy. And you know I see what you post on social media, and you're vigilant. I appreciate it. I appreciate you speaking up, and it's something that I'm proud to see you and other of your classmates doing, and trying to draw attention to it. I don't know what the solution is. I wish I did, but it's a tragedy.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, look, when you look at every other major industrialized country and you see that it doesn't happen to the extent that it happens here, you would think that it's clearly a problem here, but unfortunately, we haven't had a lot of movement. I was wondering, do you think that because of what happened with this parade, that we may see, down the line, not having kind of parades in the open air, open areas, and maybe try having something like in stadiums where people can go through metal detector security to get into the stadium?
Huh.
Unfortunately, it would decrease the amount of people, but would it
Right.
be safer?
My guess is no. We as a country have an exceptionally short memory when it comes to these sort of events, whether it was that music festival in Las Vegas a few years back, or you could just go, with people at church. There was the shooting down at the mega church this weekend. Uh, you don't think it's going to happen to you. You hope it's not going to happen to you, and you try to live your life the way it is. It's just you you feel like you're hopeless or helpless that you can't bring about change. And no, the long answer to that short question, no. I think people are still going to do what people are going to do, and they're going to pretend like it's not going to happen to them. And I don't wish that on anybody, but you also can't predict when those things are going to happen.
For sure. Well, we hope sooner rather than later we'll see change. But obviously, no matter what, it's probably gonna take some time. At best case
Agreed.
scenario.
Yeah,
But
agreed.
yeah. Well, let's try to transition here and talk about Super Bowl 58. What a game it was! I remember we briefly texted during the game, the first half. You said this game sucks, but end up
Boring.
yeah,
Yeah,
but end up
yeah.
being a classic. The Chiefs end up winning 25-22. They become the first repeat champion in 20 years, following the 03-04 Patriots. Pat Mahomes wins his third Super Bowl MVP, 333 yards, 2 touchdowns, and interception. Potentially cements his legacy among the greatest quarterbacks of all time. I know we'll touch on that here shortly. The Niners led 10-3 at half, but a key muffed punt by the special teams leads to a Marquez Valdez Scantling touchdown. Juwan Jennings rather, a touchdown pass, or touchdown catch rather. He did also throw for a touchdown, a
Yep.
CMC, but he puts the Niners up 16-13. Unfortunately, could be the difference in the game. A crucial blocked extra point from Jake Moody enables the Chiefs to go down and kick a game tying field goal. By the way, I thought it was funny that you had Jake Moody at one point in the game sets the Super Bowl record for 55 yards in the game, and then a couple quarters later, Harrison Butker sets the record for a 57-yard field goal. So I thought, obviously, other than the block point, the kickers did their job.
Yeah,
Uh,
special team. I mean, that punt was, it's tough to blame anybody on the Niners for that. But the Chief special team, I don't blame the Niners for special teams. I look at the small things that the Chiefs were doing on that coverage, right? If you take it easy, if you run past it and try to touch the ball down, maybe you don't get it, right? Players are making the right plays at the right time. The push that guy gets from the middle of the line to block the extra point. I mean, those are small things that winning teams, those are winning plays, right? There's one or two of those. You look at the stat line, right? 322 yards. You say, oh wow, it was Patrick Mahomes all game, and it wasn't. It was small things here and there. Pat Mahomes played great. We'll talk all about it, but these are total team efforts, and that's something those players are going to remember those moments for the rest of their lives. It's got to be incredible, right? You not everybody can be Patrick Mahomes, not everybody can be Christian McCaffrey, but those guys contribute on the team, right? They were there, they're there practicing all year, they're there in the locker rooms, they're doing rehab, they're doing everything, and so you love to see you love to see players like that rewarded, and yeah, you love to see the Niners choke away the game. That do.
Yeah, and then to recap, kind of the game goes to overtime, the second overtime ever after the famous 28-3 Patriots Falcons game back in 2017. New rules because each team has a chance to possess the ball no matter what, unless there's a defensive score. The Niners score a field goal on the first possession. Controversially, they decided to take the ball first. And then Mahomes leads the Chiefs down the field for a game-winning touchdown to McCole Hardman. So I said a lot there, Coach. I know you're happy about the Niners choking, but as you take a
Yeah,
broad view
yeah,
at this game, what were some of your overall thoughts? Obviously, it ended up was boring first half, and then ends up being a classic.
yeah. I could feel, as the third quarter winded down, it was still pretty slow, but the Chiefs kind of made it a game, and the fourth quarter picked up, and it was like you're at a party and the conversation stops. You know what I mean? By the time the fourth quarter rolls around, all you're saying is it's a big third down here. That's all that the what are your kids doing? What are your vacation plans? All that conversation stops, and the fourth quarter and overtime was great. I'm gonna make an admission to you here, Billy. I had no idea about the new overtime rules. I'm going, well, it looks like the Niners are gonna win it. If they had scored a touchdown there, I would have been like, well, it's over. I had no idea. I belonged on the 49ers sidelines there with Kyle Shanahan, everybody. But I don't necessarily blame them. I don't think there was an easy, obvious choice. Although having the ball second, knowing what you have to do is certainly an advantage. But whether it was Dan Campbell earlier in the playoffs or this, analytics tell you to do stuff, and when they're within, 5%, it's the coach's instinct, it's the coach's intuition, and you got to do the best you can, and it's more about what the Chiefs did than what the Niners didn't do.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about it. Obviously, that decision to defer. Travis Kelsey said a couple days ago on his podcast that he was surprised the Niners deferred. I think that thing was totally overblown. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
first of all, because I'm kind of the standpoint I'd like to get the ball first and score, so then you put the pressure on the other team
yeah,
to at least tie the game or go down the field, score a touchdown. The Niners had also just stopped the Chiefs at the end of regulation, forced them to kick a field goal. So you had a feeling the defense was probably gassed. Shanahan said, let's
yep,
get the ball first. Hopefully score a touchdown and put the pressure on Mahomes and even if they score a touchdown, we're still tied. So next possession is sudden death. And I just think about, obviously people say too, deep in Chiefs territory, I think it was a 3rd and 4, they failed to convert. Fourth
yeah,
down, people say, oh, they should have gone for it. Well, I'm like, well, if you don't get it there, then Mahomes only needs a field goal
yep.
to win the game. So I think, look, there's no clear, really answer to do that.
No,
But I
no,
just think that you kick the field goal. If you stop him and no one says anything, he's a genius. So I think a lot of things to blame Kyle Shanahan on, but I don't think there was a clear choice between whether to take the ball or defer to the second possession. I
No.
think actually I would probably take the ball and try to score. And obviously, if it worked out, he would look like a genius.
Yeah, I don't have any big, the best argument I've heard is that you get the ball second, you get to kind of you know, set up your third and fourth down. Okay, this is a two down sort of. You get to set up two plays. I think it speaks volumes, not necessarily about what the Niners and Kyle Shanahan was doing, but that all of the players sort of universally for the Chiefs said we were talking about this week one in training camp, and that sort of clarity of focus, that sort of meticulous nature that Andy Reid and the Chiefs organization have is the reason you can you know, they look an awful lot like the Patriots did, where they're just the margins are going their way, and they're a tough team to beat. They're not going to beat themselves.
Yeah, so who do you think is most to blame for the loss? I mean, look at Kyle Shanahan now. That's 3 Super Bowls where he's
Yeah,
had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, ends up blowing it. Obviously, the first Super Bowl was with the Falcons as the offensive
Falcons. Yeah,
coordinator, and that was a epic choke, 28-3. Brock Purdy, you look at his final numbers. I don't think he was terrible. I mean, I think he had
no,
2 touchdowns. Let's see here. Yeah, a touchdown, an interception. I think he ended up with like 255 yards. Yeah, 255 yards. Actually, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. But I think the key was, I think that they got what interception on Mahomes, a couple fumbles. Actually, had like
yep,
5 forced fumbles, I think. But Chiefs ended up recovering most of them. So that was another piece of bad luck. But
yeah,
you felt like,
sloppy.
yeah, you felt like you stopped the Chiefs a good amount, but you just weren't able to capitalize. So what do you think? I mean, who's most to blame
Yeah,
for this loss?
you watch it, and it reminded me an awful lot of the first Pats Rams game where they're just daring you to run it, right? Just run it, beat us, and the Rams had they had the equivalent of Christian McCaffrey. And if you go back, any Niners fan would tell you, if you go back in time in the third quarter, you run the ball, you give the ball to. I mean, Christian McCaffrey is the best running back in football, and I don't think it's a particularly close margin. Um, you got to give him a chance to chew up the clock. The the Niners defense looks so good in the first half, and it was that pass rush, right? What happens to a pass rush when you're playing, when your offense goes three and out? Is it gets tired and it gets worn down, and those moves become a little sloppier. They're not getting to the ball as quickly as they can. I think if you gave him truth serum, excuse me, Kyle Shanahan would say I should have given the ball to McCaffrey more.
But my question too is how does Brock Purdy look now? I mean, obviously, I mean, look, at one point he
Yeah,
was if they beat the Ravens on Christmas night, he might win the MVP. I mean,
yeah,
you see that that guy that placed a $200,000 bet on Purdy winning the MVP, and of course that doesn't end up cashing. But the Niners just had this philosophy of let's put all this talent around our quarterback: CMC, Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. Jawan Jennings, and get a guy in there who's a game manager. He's not going to make
yeah,
mistakes, but he might not be among the elite. And, obviously in terms of financially, it's working out for the Niners because, they're paying Purdy on a rookie contract. But it
yeah.
seemed like throughout that game, he kind of showed you he's not among the same class as the elites. How do you think Brock Purdy
No,
looks
yeah,
after
no, no.
this game? Yeah.
I think he's an above average quarterback. I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback, but I think he's what, a year two here. He's been to a championship game and a Super Bowl. I think he's got a lot of time and room to grow, right? I think you look back at, a guy like Tom Brady, late round pick, some limitations in his game, and he got better over time. He's if he keeps improving, and I think Kyle Shanahan's the best offensive mind in football. I hate saying it. Their offense, he schemes up a way to make a guy like that look above average. And if he keeps getting better, I don't see why there's any reason he can't, pass guys like Kirk Cousins. He is an above average quarterback, and in the right system with the right coaching, Kyle Shanahan's not going anywhere. Those two guys coach together and play together for the next decade. He's going to be a top five quarterback because you get mastery of that system, and all of a sudden you become that. And so I think he's above average. I didn't it, it the we the Rams play him a couple times, and I didn't see it as much, but against the Lions, his escapability, his movement was impressive. I'd like to see him do it a little bit more in the pocket, a little bit more behind the line of scrimmage and set his guys up, but picked up a couple first downs, and yeah, he's a good ball player. I'm not looking forward to playing against him. But I think you said it. The difference here is, in 3 years, is he going to be the third highest paid quarterback? Because the 49ers are going to look like a different team, and he's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Josh Allen. He's not one of those guys that's gonna carry a team single-handedly yet. Yet.
Yeah, and I mean, you got to give him credit. I mean, they were down, probably should have lost to both the Packers and the Lions, and
Yeah.
he's the quarterback, so you got to give
Yeah.
him credit for making the plays and the
Oh
throws
yeah.
necessary to lead them to both those comebacks. I wanted to ask you about this. Was I think the number one question I had going into this podcast, and I have a feeling we might have a debate here. We
Okay.
talk about Patrick Mahomes now. Again, like I talked about, his third Super Bowl championship, his third Super Bowl MVP, is now 3-1 in Super Bowls. The Chiefs have made the big game for the last 5 years. Is Patrick Mahomes, in your book, Coach, the greatest quarterback of all time? And if
No.
not, what does he have to do to pass Brady?
I think I think it's gonna be tough for him. I think Andy Reid is 3 or 4 years from being done, maybe, if not sooner. And if they get a guy in there who replaces him and is as creative, who has as good a connection with him, I think Tom Brady got lucky that he and Belichick were together for as long as they were. And I think that obviously you look now and it looks like Belichick might not have been, it might have been a little bit more 60-40 Brady Belichick than we might have said 3 or 4 years ago. But he's got a ways to go. Seven Super Bowls is seven Super Bowls with two teams over the course of 20 years. I think he's close. I mean, he's as close as anybody I've seen. I barely watched Joe Montana play when I was young, but I think he's got a real shot. He's got a real shot, and if you look back at some of those Super Bowls that the Pats won, and both times against the Rams, Brady was a game manager game one, and they scored 13 points against the Rams the second time. Those are games that Tom Brady didn't lose, but going three wins and three MVPs for Patrick Mahomes, and I think it's closer to 6 or 7, and he's right there with him. Boy, it would have gone a long way if he could have traded one of these other three, and when he played Brady, he beat him. That would have gone a long way. But Brady getting him in the one Super Bowl they played against each other is a notch in his belt.
Yeah, that's the thing I think that's different between this debate, Mahomes and Brady, and LeBron and Jordan, for example, is that we
Yeah.
actually saw Mahomes and Brady play against each other, and
Yeah.
Brady beat him twice in the playoffs in the AFC Championship game, and of course in the Super Bowl. So you have Mahomes ahead of Joe Montana. Montana 4-0 in Super Bowls, 11
Yeah,
touchdowns, no
no,
interceptions.
I think no. I think he is one more Super Bowl away from going past Joe. I think that what we're beginning to see here now is that it is Mahomes. And when you looked at Joe Montana, it was Joe, but it was Jerry. It was that defense. It was Ronnie Lott. It was they had a team that was chock full of Hall of Famers. Um, and Steve Young comes in right behind him and wins 1-2 and takes a couple teams to championship games, stuff like that. And so I think Mahomes is close, if not edging a little bit past him. He is a unique talent.
Coach, I already believe that Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback of all time.
Whoa.
I just think
Are you talking like physical capability? Like he is clearly a better thrower of the football at a younger age than Tom Brady was. You like processing, athleticism, all of that taken into account?
Yeah, and I think from a talent perspective, I mean, I think, it's him and Aaron Rodgers, and obviously,
Yeah.
with his
Yeah.
resume, I think his ability to run the ball, that's something that Tom Brady
Mhm.
never had. But I actually think,
Yep.
Coach, this is kind of a bigger discussion about Tom Brady. And I don't know if we've had this discussion on the podcast before, but I know I've had this with other friends and debated them. I don't think Tom Brady is the GOAT. He is the luckiest of all time. Let me explain. First, before I kind
All
of go
right.
into my
I'm
monologue,
all for it.
yeah. So, I mean, I think you would agree if the Seahawks run the ball with Marshawn Lynch, that was the
Oh
worst
yeah.
play call to throw the ball. Malcolm Butler
Oh yeah.
intercepts the ball. And then the all-time worst choke, Falcons up 28-3. So you agree right there. Those are two. I mean,
Two very close. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you take those two out the way. That's already that's 5 rings right there. In the Panthers Super Bowl, the Panthers kicked the ball out of bounds in the lead up to Vinatieri's field goal. You had and look, I mean, what I thought was great about this Super Bowl is that at least you could say both teams, the Chiefs and the Niners, possessed the ball. Whereas
Yeah,
Brady in the Falcons Super Bowl, the Falcons don't have a chance to tie the game. So who's not to say they don't get the
right.
ball and
Yeah.
go down and tie the game? The Chiefs too in that AFC Championship game, which, by the way, I mean, D Ford was not offsides. That's another feather that was a luck in Brady's cap. And then I also think this is something
No
that I don't.
game. Yeah,
Yeah,
the tuck rule. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, the
absolutely.
Tuck rule. I mean, your Rams might win if not for the Tuck rule that year. You had Deflate Gate, Spy Gate. I think those are checkered parts of Brady's past. And I think this is something too, Coach, that a lot of people aren't thinking about. Is that back when Brady was with the Patriots, the 2 seed got the bye. So
Yeah.
and then you think
No.
about it. I mean, look at the AFC East. I mean, what quarterback competition was there for most of Brady's time? I mean, Josh Allen, Tua, Aaron Rodgers, they all came after he long left. So I think you combine the fact with they played in a weak division, 2 seeds got the bye, so you automatically, even if you were a 2 seed, you played less games, and then you only had to maybe win one game on the road. Um, and
Uh-huh.
then and then also only Hall of Fame quarterbacks he played in his matchups were Kurt Warner and Pat Mahomes. So I think you take all those into consideration. Brady is the luckiest of all time. What do you say about all that?
I, if I were an arguing man, I might hold that argument up to a mirror and say that Patrick Mahomes is in the easiest division in the AFC right now. They're not very good. There's not a lot of quality opponents. Even though Justin Herbert's a nice quarterback, he hasn't really done anything. I would say that the Chiefs got a little lucky with a ball bouncing off a guy's foot this time. I would argue that I can't believe you got me on here defending Tom Brady, is what I would say. I think Mahomes has got a little ways to go, but I still think Brady's got the edge.
But you do agree, though. I mean, Marshawn Lynch not running the ball, the Falcons epic. I mean, that's
Hey,
two. I mean, even
hey
by
man,
luck standards, that's
I
pretty high
get it.
up there.
I get it. Those are those, but that's what happened, right? If I had a time machine, I'd go tell Mike Martz to run the ball with Marshawn with Marshall Faulk. I can't change him.
All right. I mean, that's a good point. But so you'd say right now, just to recap, Mahomes is probably still third because he doesn't have 4 to match Montana.
Yeah. I think he found his way past like Peyton Manning. I think a guy like Terry Bradshaw, Troy Aikman, those guys who were again kind of like Montana in that you look at those teams and it's like, my God, they got 6, 7 Hall of Fame teammates. And I think Travis Kelce is, I think Chris Ford is. Um, but I'm not saying, and even Ford might not be a Hall of Famer. I'm not seeing the depth of teammate quality that some of those other quarterbacks had. And so that's why I think I've got him pushing Montana for number 2 right now.
So where do you think Andy Reid ranks among the greatest coaches ever? And coach, I'm gonna put up maybe another hot take here. I think Andy Reid is the greatest coach of all
Okay,
time.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. And we are going to disagree again, but go ahead, give me your sales pitch.
Yeah, so you look at it, he's got 3 Super Bowls. First of all, his
Mhm.
coaching tree is way better than Belichick's. That's not even disputable. You've got
Not close. Yep.
Super Bowl champions in John Harbaugh, Doug Peterson, Ron Rivera made a Super Bowl. Sean McDermott has been a really good coach with the Bills. We don't even
Mhm.
need to talk about how bad, Bills assistants have been from McDaniels to Patricia and so on and so forth. And then Belichick, I mean, it's look, we saw what happened this year. I mean, and last couple years without Brady, he hasn't been good without Tom Brady.
Yeah.
People will say, well, Andy only started winning Super Bowls when Patrick Mahomes was around, which is true, but he made 5 NFC title games with Donovan McNabb in a Super Bowl appearance, and he consistently made the playoffs with Alex Smith as the Chiefs quarterback in the pre-Mahomes era. Belichick basically hasn't been able to do anything without Brady. So I think you take all those things into consideration. I mean, I know he's got
Yeah.
half as many Super Bowls, but I do think Andy Reid has the resume to make a case for being the greatest coach of all time.
That's great. Always love when you bring up Syracuse athletes. You love to hear a Donovan McNabb nod. That's a Pro Bowl, maybe not all pro quarterback at that point, but he was a Pro Bowler. He's had consistently strong quarterback play, even when they brought in Michael Vick, right? He's always um, you know, he's always had good quarterbacks, and I think you're right also though that he's used them well. He's maximized their talents well, and whether it is Vic or McNabb, or, he is able to get the most out of those guys. I don't even have him on the Mount Rushmore though, Billy. Okay, I got Belichick, and it's not close. You're right. Andy Reid's tree is better, but what's that tell you about Andy Reid? He perpetually has quality individuals around him, which means those guys get some of it, right? It can't just all be the head coach, the assistant coach gets it. So I got Belichick, and I got guys who got more Super Bowls than him. I got Bill Walsh. His coaching tree and his offensive style is still something that, permeates the game today. I think even is Reid from the Bill Walsh coaching tree?
I believe so. Yep.
Okay. I've got Vince Lombardi, I've got Don Shula, and I've got Chuck Noll. So all those guys either have more wins or more Super Bowls than him, and so I'm gonna give the old guys a little bit of credit here. But Andy Reid's moving his way up too. He's right in that pack with those guys. It's funny, he's definitely turned a new leaf here. He was somebody that up until 5 years ago was in that Marty Schottenheimer sort of discussion where it was, or a Marv Levy, good coach, but when the going got tough, couldn't handle it, and he's put himself in this conversation. I would attribute that more to Patrick Mahomes than I would, but fair enough. I'm making the argument why all these guys all coached a ton of Hall of Famers, but you might be holding up a mirror to my argument here, Billy.
But my question is kind of a generic question. How do you determine the GOAT? Because I think we can both agree, especially and I know it's a different
Yeah,
sport, but basketball, for example, we don't say the guy with the most championship is automatically a GOAT, because otherwise
yeah,
Bill Russell would be the GOAT, and
yeah,
very few people say that. So what did you say? I mean, because I think longevity has to play into it. I think obviously championships.
yeah,
I mean, how do you
yeah.
go about determining who is your GOAT?
Influence, yeah, influence. I think I think that's a tip towards Andy Reid as well. A guy like Michael Jordan often gets put ahead of Bill Russell, despite having all the same attributes, right? Bill Russell was a killer by all accounts, right? Was a guy that would rip your heart out in these final games, never, lost like one or two game sevens and had like 15 or 16 wins in game sevens, that sort of tenacity. But I don't know that it translated off the field, right? The way Michael Jordan was just sort of everywhere. And so there is some, when there's some ties there, right? They've never lost championships. The league was a little deeper when Jordan played, but you say, all right, if we got to make some choices here, it's probably down to influence. And nobody says, oh, I want to play basketball like Bill Russell. People want to play like Michael. And so I guess I you know yeah, I think you might be right about Belichick. You might be winning me over here, at least about him. He may have just paired himself well with a good quarterback. But I think when you say this, it makes me want to move Bill Walsh up a little bit higher. I think he probably gets a little, whether it was Mike Shanahan or now Kyle Shanahan, these guys are taking his offense, and this is that it's wins. A guy like John Madden who had a super high win percentage, but only did it for like a decade. Probably can't be considered that. A lot of wins, championships, it's all of it.
So you look at the Super Bowl windows for both of these teams. I mean, you look at the
Uh-huh.
Chiefs; they're going to try to three-peat for the first time in NFL history. That's never been done before. And the Niners, you kind of feel like maybe they're getting '90s Bills vibes, with the sense that they keep
Yeah.
getting their NFC Championship game, Super Bowl, but haven't been able to get over the hump. So, what do you think is the Super Bowl window for both of these teams? And if you had to make a prediction, you look at Vegas; they're already saying the Niners, even over the Chiefs, are the
Yeah.
favorite to win it
Yeah.
all next year. Who's more likely to make it to Super Bowl 59?
I still think it's Chiefs. I think with Patrick Mahomes there, but like I said, right, I think I'll be interested to see what happens. Mahomes probably got another 10 years left. I don't think Reid has 10 years left. I want to see what happens when Andy Reid steps away. But as long as those two are together, I think they're going to improve their receiver room. I think Rice is going to get better. I'll be interested to see with Travis Kelce, tight ends. You know, these guys, him, Gronk, they take a beating. Going over the middle, extending drive. Reaching for that first down. I don't think he's got much more in him. And so, how does he develop a new safety, a new safety blanket? Is the run game going to pick up a little bit? But I trust Andy Reid. I trust those two. And I think, I've heard some sniping, seeing Steve Wilkes get fired, some of the offensive linemen sniping at each other. It's tough oftentimes for the teams that lose to bounce back and come back even to the playoffs. So I'll be interested with the Niners, but as long as Purdy's on that rookie contract, they can keep spending. And that is the cheat code in the NFL, is having a guy who you're paying next to nothing at the most important position in the sport. When they got to start paying him like a top 5 quarterback, which if he keeps at this trajectory, they're going to have to do, their team's going to look an awful lot different.
So where does this Super Bowl rank in terms of the greatest Super Bowls of all time? We talked about it. It's the second Super Bowl ever to go to overtime, which is crazy because there's been 58 of them. You thought,
Yeah.
more than 2 would go to overtime. The way I always answer this question, coach, is I would say my favorite Super Bowl is Ravens over 49ers, which was I think,
Yeah.
2013.
Yeah.
I just think, obviously it was a great game. The Harbaugh brothers facing off. You had the blackout, with
Yeah.
Beyonce leaving the stage, and obviously
Yeah.
it was delayed for 40 minutes. I think looking back now, you think about Colin Kaepernick, the way he was blackballed out of the NFL. I wonder if he wins that Super Bowl, if he
Right.
ends up, yeah, I think he doesn't end up getting blackballed out the NFL. And obviously, you had Ray Lewis's final game, Ed Reed. So that's probably my favorite Super Bowl. But then you look at
Sure.
it, I mean, Patriots, Giants, both of them were great. But obviously, the one where the Patriots are coming in 18-0 and Eli Manning, David Tyree, the rest is history. I think Steelers, Cardinals, that Santonio Holmes catch
Oof.
is
Yeah.
unforgettable.
Yeah.
Larry
Definitely.
Fitzgerald, he had a great game. I know you'd probably throw in Rams Titans in there. Um, uh, and Patriots. So I would say the Patriots Seahawks is the best ending because that's the
Yeah.
most unexpected. Malcolm Butler making that play at the 1 yard line. People are going to throw in the 28-3 Patriots Falcons game. So I named a few there, but what do you think? Where does this game rank in
I,
terms of among all those?
it's right up there, right? As you were naming those off, I was trying to think which one of those games was a game the whole way, right? And very few are, right? I think the Super Bowl ends up the first half gets a little antsy, and you're not seeing a lot of, or in the case of that Falcons one, the back and forth where one half is owned by either team. And you love to see that game came down to a game-winning play. I want to see a game-winning play like Bills Giants back in the 90s with the wide right, and you like seeing it come down to that. Malcolm Butler, that Aaron Donald sack, in the not sack but pressure against the Bengals. Those are you want to be sitting there going, this is the whole. I've watched 20 weeks of football. I have invested a lot of time, even if these aren't my teams, right? I want to see something happen here. And when it comes down to that, this is another in the list of great ends. You just love it's such a great sport and such a rewarding way to end the season in when games are close. And that's all I want. And you'll talk about it a few years from now and you won't remember the sloppiness. There were a lot of penalties, right? At big times, penalties that hurt drives in the beginning of the game, the fumbles in the red zone. I mean, those sort of moments go away. It's the end of I think probably the best one in terms of overall, scoring and enjoyment was probably the Eagles Pats game a few years back with Nick Foles. Both teams just, you know, Tom Brady, I think, almost threw 500 yards. It was just a shootout. And I love high scoring games. What can I say? Especially when my defense isn't involved. But that one probably stands out. But I was a Patriots hater, so that was good on both ends.
What'd you think of the halftime show? I mean, Usher headlined it. I think people were
Yeah.
all googling his age because they're like, I don't know how he's 45 and he looks that good for that age. But you had Alicia Keys was in there, her, CeeLo Green, I believe, Will I Am. So I personally thought that because I thought the last 2 years with Snoop Dogg and that whole crew a few years ago
Mhm.
and Rihanna last year, that was I think that's top 5 halftime shows I've ever seen. So that probably I think colored my taste towards this one. I say it was all right. It wasn't terrible. I don't think it was among the best of all time, but I thought Usher did a good job. What do you think? How did you think about the halftime show?
The first thing you just reminded me, right in the middle of the show, somebody turns at this gathering we're all at, and they go, "What do you think?" Usher is our age, right? He is just our age. And as somebody says that, he rips his shirt off, and all of the wives started laughing at the husbands because that is not what we look like with our shirts off. But I agree with you. I thought it was a fine performance. I love his music. I was excited to hear all the songs. It felt a little rushed. It felt a little clunky. Um, I don't know. Most years I like that minute to the next song minute, and I wasn't feeling this as much. Love Ludacris. Was excited to see him. But yeah, it was fine. I said I gave it a 7 out of 10, which was good, above average. He held my attention, but it wasn't that exciting.
And I have to ask you before we move away from the Super Bowl, what are your thoughts on the whole Taylor Swift dynamic this season? Of course, I think to her credit, she brought a lot of people, not even I don't
Oh
know
yeah,
about hardcore fans, but at least casuals to watch the games. I don't know if are your kids listening to Taylor Swift? Are you a Taylor Swift fan or Miss Curtin?
love. Yeah. We love Taylor Swift in the house. We're all for her message, and we love talented songwriters and singers, people that work hard for their own success. We're all about that. Um, a real proud father parenting moment. My daughter, as you know, is a Ravens fan, and after um, the Ravens lost to the Chiefs, she said she's not going to listen to Taylor Swift for 2 weeks through the Super Bowl. So after the AFC Championship game, anytime it would come on the radio, we had to change it because she just couldn't stand what Taylor's boyfriend did to it. I don't know why it's a big deal, right? When Giselle was dating Tom Brady, they cut to her all the time. I don't understand why people care, and I don't care that people care. I think it's wonderful. I love to see young people falling in love, and to see who Travis seems like a wonderful guy. I've seen a couple of his podcasts. They say that it is the equivalent of when you and I get together. I think our facial hair might be better though, when the with the little Fu Manchu there.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
is
yeah.
that is the real deal there, Billy. So I'm all for it. I love the both of them. I'm all, I hope everything turns out well for them.
Yeah, especially because when you look at it, I mean, I think they talked about it for the Super Bowl. She was only on air 54 seconds. We're talking about a 4 or 5 hour broadcast. When
Yeah,
you consider
it's
everything, I mean, it's nothing. Nothing.
I'd rather them cut to her and Blake Lively than some schlub that wearing a Niners jersey up in the 400s. Yeah, let's see the famous people celebrating. What are we doing here? Come on.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. So, what are your way too early predictions for Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans next year? I think the date's February 9th. But if you had to predict right now, who are the two teams meeting up in that Super Bowl and who do you have ultimately winning?
I will, and until further notice, I'll be picking the Chiefs as the AFC team. And I know who your AFC team is going to be. Let's get that out of the way right now. And I think the Packers. I'm gonna take I thought they finished the year great. They looked really good. I think Jordan Love is just the next. I'm not gonna say he's gonna be a Hall of Famer, but he looked good. He looked real good, and they're young, they're talented. Maybe they're a year away, but that was a team that the second half of the year really sort of impressed me. And so I'll go out on a limb and say it's them, although there's no team maybe outside of them. I don't know what's going on with the Eagles. I don't know what's going on with the Cowboys. I'm optimistic about the Rams, but they still have some holes to fill. And so I thought the Packers offensive line looked good. He looked like a young Aaron Rodgers, backpedaling, finding time, finding space, and they've got elite wide receiver talent. So I'll give them a nod.
Coach, we are thinking on the same wavelength. I had the Packers as well in my way too early prediction. And you already said it. I am going with the Baltimore
Ravens,
Ravens to
of
win
course
this.
you are.
Although I will say to my credit, I did say Lamar Jackson would win the MVP.
You
And
get that. You get that. I had Jalen Hurts, but I was as it got closer, I was going Billy. Billy called it. Billy called it.
yeah, so we both agree. Well, on the Packers, I have the Ravens over the Packers. You have the
Okay.
Chiefs over the Packers. But what do you think about? And I think what this one makes the NFL so great is that on average, 7 teams make the playoffs the following season that didn't make it the previous
Yep.
season. So
Yep.
what do you? I think there's a couple obvious ones, but a couple of good ones. Who do you think is a team that didn't make the playoffs this year that will make it next year?
I'll give you one obvious one. I think the Bengals bounce back. I think that division's tough. I think that may be. I think that may be a challenge, but I think they find a way to bounce back. Joe Burrow is really good. They're going to keep T. Higgins. It sounds like they've got a little work to do on defense, but we've seen what they're capable of when everybody's healthy. So I think the Bengals are a kind of obvious bounce back. And I've got the Falcons in the NFC. I think they're a quarterback away from being an excellent team, and I'll be interested with their new coaching staff, what things look like. But they're a Kirk Cousins signing or a Justin Fields trade away from uh, a massive upgrade in that offense. It was tough to watch. And this is coming from somebody who had Kyle Pitts for 2 years on their fantasy team. It's just tough to watch those games with subpar quarterbacks playing. It's just brutal to see, you know, this high-powered offense where a guy can't hit open wide receivers, can't hit tight ends. Their running backs are out of this world, and they still can't find a way to put up points. So Falcons, assuming they're not running back with Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke, and the Bengals. What about you? What do you have there?
I have in the NFC, I'm going to go with the Vikings. Now, this is assuming that Kirk Cousins resigns and they keep
Okay.
Justin Jefferson. I just
Okay.
thought they were I think your pick too to win the division going
Yeah.
into the
Yep.
year. So I think if Kirk Cousins is healthy, I don't know what he can do in the playoffs, but I think in the regular season he's
Yeah.
good enough to take him a division title. And then I'm going with probably the other obvious answer in the AFC, the Chargers. I mean, Jim Harbaugh is now your coach. Justin Herbert. If you can kind of fix some of the cap issues. Surrounding the team. I know some of the players are older on defense, especially a guy like Khalil Mack. But I think Jim Harbaugh is the kind of guy who's proven to be a winner. And I think the Chargers have a really good shot to make the
They
playoffs
got
with him
a,
as their coach.
they got a soft division too. I mean, outside of the Chiefs, but when you got not four easy wins, but wins that games that you can go in and sort of build your schedule up. I got a year for them. I think you're right about the issues with the salary cap, and I think Harbaugh is gonna, he'll take some time, but he is a magnificent coach. He does it well, and uh, I think he's a bit of a goofball sometimes, but the proof is in the pudding. He was great when he was with the Niners. He was great at Michigan. He was great at Stanford. Not okay, not good. He was great in all those places, and so I think he has maybe a year where they are 9-8. They finally win a couple games when it down the stretch, which the Chargers seem to lose all the time. But I think they're maybe in 2 years they're that 13-4 sort of team where they look like a juggernaut.
Well, that's a great discussion there. I want to transition to some big picture questions, and
Oh
actually,
yeah.
one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, what was your reaction watching the Curtin Bowl? I mean, for those who don't know, Coach is a Rams fan, and his wife, Mrs. Curtin, is a Lions fan. In fact, her whole family are Lions fans, and
Yes.
obviously, so many storylines in that game. It might have been honestly maybe one of the best games in the playoffs when you think about the back and forth, the tension. Matt
Hmm.
Stafford
Yep.
returns to Detroit. Jared Goff is facing his old team that he took to a Super Bowl a couple years ago. Unfortunately, comes down to the wire for you, and the Rams lose. And so, what was your reaction watching that game and knowing the guy that you are? I know eventually you were happy for your wife and her family, but what was kind of your reaction to watching the game, and how long did it take to get to that happiness for your wife and her family?
I'll let you know when I've gotten there. Because I'm not there yet. But we learned in the 2013 ALCS we can't watch these games together. The Sox and the Tigers played, and it's not fun. We don't enjoy it. We've got we want to support, we want to be happy. We're both very serious fans. My wife is not like sit there and play on her phone while the Lions are on. She sits there and she is intense. She yells when they score, she's fired up. When the Rams score, I'm fired up. She went into the city and watched with some work friends that are also Lions fans, and I stayed at home and watched. I put the kids to bed and I watched by myself at the house. I'm not a fun person to be around when my team is on. I am especially come playoff time. And it sucked. It stings. It hurts. And I'm just, it reminds me of when I used to coach the end of seasons. You never prepare for it mentally. You never, going into those games, you think we're going to win. We're going to find a way. I like the game plan. The guys are going to get it figured out. And the season ends and it's just this gut punch. And it's, I know I'm not on the team, but I spend a lot of the fall reading articles and listening to podcasts, and I watch every game. And when the season ends, it's just it's gutting. You just sit there, and I'm glad she wasn't home. she was with friends and they were recording it and they had a blast and there's fun videos of it. And I'm thrilled for the city. And the city means a lot to us. I've married into Detroit, and whether it's the sports, whether it's the sort of comeback nature of this city. This is a city that was incredibly important to the early success of our country in the last 100 years, and it became a punchline, which you don't. I just don't understand why people in our own country would make fun of a proud city like that, and to see it starting to have a bit of a renaissance. And to see their football team get a win like that, I'll be able to look back and appreciate it. But it sucks. I didn't roll over that night when she got home and say, I'm happy for you. I was salty. I woke up the next morning. I was still salty. I don't know any Rams fans, Billy. I don't know a single other person that roots for the Rams. I've seen people walking, and I know more Lions fans than I know Jets fans or Giants fans or Bills fans, right? Everybody I know in my wife's side of the family, their aunts, uncles, cousins, all their high school friends. Everybody's Lions fans, and so uh, it sucked. It's it was not. I was not happy. I was not pleasant.
Well, speaking of the Lions, do you think they can repeat their success? I mean, Dan Campbell had that. I mean, you could say it's a questionable quote, but Dan
Yeah,
Campbell speaks like it is about, it's going to be a much tougher road for us next year. And
yeah,
I mean, first of all, I think his coaching. This we can go on another tangent about this, but I think that he coached like it was Madden in some of these games. I mean, like in the Cowboys game when you have the penalty again, it was a bad penalty call, but
yeah,
when you have that and you move the ball back to six, I don't care that you got the 5 yards back. You kick the extra point, go to overtime, go for a chance, play, trust your defense if you have to play on defense and be able to win the game in overtime. And then obviously up 24-7, I thought there were a few times where he trusted the analytics too much when he could have kicked the field goal, and then the end of the game would have been a lot different. But I think my bigger point, coach, is that I don't see the Lions. I love Mrs. Curtin, but I don't see the Lions having the same success they have next season when you talk about it. To use a quote that the young kids are saying now, Jordan Love is him. I believe that. I mean,
yeah.
he showed what he can do in the playoffs. And the Bears, I mean, 7-9, they were bad, but the fact that they won 7 games, I'm shocked. And you don't know if they'll make a big trade for their number one pick, or they, draft Caleb Williams if
Yeah.
he's good, or Marvin Harrison Jr. And then the Vikings, if they can re-sign Kirk Cousins, like we just talked about, I thought they were the favorite going into the season. So I don't see how the Lions can repeat their success next year, even with their talent. What do you say about all that?
Yeah. I think it's the defensive side of the ball. I think that offense is top five. They've got that offensive line is going to be that is the top one of the best offensive lines in football. The running backs are going to be good next year. Their wide receiver core, I think Jameson Williams is only getting better. When you give Jared Goff time, he is a good quarterback. He's not above average. He is a good quarterback when he gets time. He can make every single throw. Um, so it's can you give Hutch a little bit of help, right? The linebacker, I'm forgetting his name, out of Iowa they drafted, was nice, but their secondary was soft. That's the sort of thing that you keep your defense on the field a little bit longer. You kind of force your coach's hand, and I'm not ready to rule them out yet. I think they've built their team the right way, right? You see the Vikings lose Justin Jefferson, and they're not a team that's built for the long haul. There's not a lot of teams that are, right? But if a guy like Amon-Ra goes down, are the Lions worse off? Yes. I think they've built depth the right way, and that's the way you build a team that in the NFL where there's 17 games, guys are going to get hurt. Can you fill in? Can you do it? They've got that on the offensive side of the ball. I'll be interested on the defensive side. Um, I think they find a way back into the playoffs again next year. I'll be interested, right? It's tough to say what these teams are going to look like.
And you think about all the different coaching hires that happened this offseason. We just talked about one of them, Jim Harbaugh, the
Yep.
most high
Yeah.
profile one going to the Chargers. We had Raheem Morris, the Rams defensive coordinator, getting another
Yep.
chance with the Falcons. You have Dan Quinn, which I was kind of suspect on going to the Commanders, but I think he's done a good job putting a good coaching staff around him. Anthony Lynn, Cliff Kingsbury. I think he deserves a shot as an offensive
Mhm.
coordinator. Obviously, as a head coach, is suspect, but I think he's a decent hire. So you look at obviously the coaching hires. What stands out to you? Obviously, Jim Harbaugh, but any of the other ones that you really like?
Yeah, I'm excited for Raheem. He was young when he was the Bucks coach. I think he was like 35, and that's tough when you're coaching guys that are about the same age as you. And he was an awesome coordinator for the Rams. He was great at it. And I think he's the sort of guy that will translate. I think there are people that are coordinators, and it's tough. You look at a guy like Steve Spagnuolo, and it's like, why chase a head coaching job? Why do that? Right? Why not, Cliff Kingsbury? Be content to be the guru, be the guy that people criticize Cliff Kingsbury when he was a head coach because he only paid attention to the offense. Then just pay attention to the offense, right? Don't worry about the defensive side of the ball. Steve Spagnuolo is making maybe not a Hall of Fame career, but a pretty darn good career, multiple Super Bowls on multiple teams as a D coordinator do it. And so I think a guy like Raheem was a wonderful D coordinator, but you see a guy like him, or why am I blanking on the 49ers former defensive coordinator who's Houston's head coach now?
D'Amico Ryan's.
D'Amico Ryans. These guys are leaders. They've proven it, and I think they're gonna. I think Raheem is getting into a good situation. That's a big deal too. I think Dan Campbell's or not Dan Campbell. I think the Commanders are an iffy team in a tough division, and that's Dan Quinn's going to have his work cut out for him. I think going into the NFC South, where you get to play the Panthers, you get to play the Bucks. Maybe Baker Mayfield's back, maybe not. Those Saints are a mediocre team. That's the sort of thing that all of a sudden, you know, Raheem has a good year, good for him, and I think I like Gerard Mayo too. I like continuity. I like hiring people from within. You get to see these guys' work ethic. You get to see what they're all about. I think that's why you saw like a guy like Antonio Pierce last year, who was with the guys. The guys wanted him. They loved him. And you can tell the players for the Patriots respect Gerard Mayo. The ownership likes him. It's going to be tough. Those are big shoes to fill, but it's not quite the same. These last couple of years have gone the way that they have. He's not, Belichick's not riding out of town a hero. He was kind of pushed out. So I think Gerard Mayo's going to be pretty good, and I think that AFC East is winnable. I think all those teams are kind of paper lions, and or is it paper tigers? One of those two. Um, I think probably the most consistent team in that division is the Jets, and they have the chance to be with Rodgers coming back. I think the Bills are chokers, and I love Josh Allen. He seems like a great guy. I know my buddies are all Bills fans, but when they lost, I was not. I was feeling for my friends, but it was not shocking. And the Dolphins are the Dolphins.
Are you surprised though that Bill wasn't hired? I mean, I think about not just Bill, but Mike Vrabel. I mean, he was a guy
Yeah.
that did a great job with the
Yeah.
Titans. Neither of them were hired. I mean, if I were the Commanders, I would have honestly hired either Bill or Vrabel over Dan Quinn. I thought they're better coaches, and Bill, of course, I mean, according to most people, is the greatest coach of all time. So, were you surprised that not just
Yeah.
Mike Vrabel but Coach Bill Belichick weren't hired in this hiring cycle?
I think Vrabel was the bigger surprise for me. I think he had a couple tough years there in Tennessee. It seems like he rubbed some people the wrong way. It seemed like he was putting people off in management, and I think other GMs, other owners hear about this. It's a small community, and I think that might be tough. But I agree with you. I think even the Panthers or the Commanders could have used a guy like that sets the tempo. That he seems like a real the buck stops here kind of guy. That they're not. He knows what he wants, and he's going to hold people accountable to it. And those are organizations that need that, right? I think there are some jobs that you can come into and some of the work is going to be done for you. And, I'm not sure about Belichick. I know he wants to get the wins record, but hiring a 70-year-old who doesn't want to listen to your GM, whose track record as a GM was not good, It's tough. You've got to have. I think he's the next Cowboys coach. I think he goes into Dallas next year once they finally make a decision on McCarthy, and they've got a talented roster. They've got an owner who knows his play. He's not a new owner. He's not a he is the owner in the NFL. His son's the GM. He's done a good job. He's put a good team together. My guess is they go there and he goes there and spends a couple of years getting the wins record, tries to bring the next Super Bowl to Dallas is my guess.
I agree with you. I think Bill is either going to be the next Cowboys coach or the next Eagles coach. Two
Yeah.
teams that have the talent to win it all, but need the right coach. I think to take it
Yeah.
there. I'm not sure that McCarthy or Sirianni will get it done next year. I was curious too. Who do you think of all these great quarterbacks is under the most pressure to win next year? And the way I kind of categorize this, I really picked four guys. I think
Yeah.
first of all, I think it's surprising. I don't know if you knew this stat or not. Dak Prescott is the longest tenured quarterback with one team. When you think about all the different changes that have taken place, obviously Brady retiring, Rodgers switching teams, but
In the
Dak
entire
Prescott,
NFL.
yeah, it's
Wow.
pretty
I wouldn't
incredible.
have had
So
that. I
yeah,
wouldn't have
so
had that.
yeah, so Dak, I think you got to throw in there for that reason, and I think the next three are kind of in a category of their own: Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. Again, it's how you view them. I mean, Josh Allen, probably of those three guys, has probably had the most consistent career up to this point. Joe
Yeah.
Burrow has the Super Bowl appearance, and then Lamar Jackson, obviously, he's my guy, but two MVPs. Every other quarterback that won two MVPs at least won a Super Bowl. So for that reason, I think the two it depends on how you weigh it, but I think the two MVPs put me as saying Lamar Jackson has the most pressure to win next year. What about you? Do you think it's Lamar or one of those
Yeah.
other guys?
I don't think Burrow's in the same conversation. I think he's gotten himself to the Super Bowl. He's seen some playoff success. I think he wants to get back there. I think he's a year or two away from feeling that pressure again. But um yeah, I think Dak has that pressure, but it is more the fact that he's the Cowboys quarterback, right? If he were playing the way he did um for the Saints, there'd be some rumblings about him. There'd be a first take section about him. But when you're the Cowboys quarterback, it's all the time. It's unrelenting. I don't think he's up there with those other guys. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's above average, but he's not there. I think it's Josh and Lamar. And I think you're right. I think it is a little bit more Lamar because um, you know, it feels like Lamar's got it all around him, right? It feels like he's a great quarterback. It feels like he's awesome, and it felt like they had the best defense in the NFL last year, and they had added wide receivers, and they added they've got a solid running game. It feels like Josh Allen is kind of doing it on his own. It does sometimes, watching Diggs drop balls. Their defense got hurt. They got dinged up. Their big signings, the two Rams DNs, Leonard Floyd and Von Miller didn't do anything. And so it did feel like he was kind of doing it on his own. But you hold Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs to 17 points, you'd like to think at a home playoff game they could get that done. And Lamar looked bad. I don't, he it wasn't that other things went wrong. It wasn't like a Brock Purdy game where we said, hey, he played okay. The other guy just beat him. He played badly, and he exercised some demons with that Texans win, but that can't be it. That can't be it. He's gotta find himself in a Super Bowl one of these days, or he's going to be remembered as the rich man's Kirk Cousins, a guy who can do it in the regular season, but come playoff time just doesn't get the job done.
Do you think the Bears keep the number one pick or trade down? Because there's been a lot of talk. You draft Caleb Williams. By the way, I've seen Merrill Hodge. I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh yeah.
His evaluation of Johnny Manziel go viral again. He was spot on, and he's come
Yep.
back now and said that he doesn't think Caleb Williams is going to be a star. And I think you got to give Justin Fields some credit. He's played well considering the
Yep.
circumstances. I mean,
Yep.
it hasn't been his fault entirely that the Bears are in the situation they're in. So some people are saying maybe you traded down, draft a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. Or no, you stick with Caleb Williams and figure your way out from there. People are saying maybe the Commanders should trade up to get the first pick with Cliff Kingsbury. He coached Caleb Williams in DC.
Yeah.
But what do you think Chicago should do? Keep the number one
I,
pick or trade him?
Yeah, I don't think you overthink it. You've got two picks in the top 10 this year. You pick up Caleb Williams, you trade Justin Fields, you get some draft capital for him. I don't know if it's a couple second rounders. I don't know if he's worth a first rounder, but he's about to hit that threshold where all of a sudden you have to pay. Justin Fields is good. You're right. He got better the last couple of years. He showed he was a little bit more than a running quarterback. He's a great runner, but I think he's as a thrower, he's pretty good. I would not say he was anywhere close to elite. But you bring in that rookie on the rookie contract. I didn't feel like Justin Fields was one offensive lineman or another wide receiver away from a huge breakout. I think you bring in Caleb Williams, you turn the keys over to him and you let him go. I think, yeah, I don't think he's Johnny Manziel. You look at the way Johnny Manziel played and his size and all the reports around him about his work ethic. I mean, this was a long way coming. And I don't think Merrill Hodge is saying that about him, but he might be saying he's not quite the caliber of quarterback that people think he is. But no, I think you pick him, you pay him whatever 2% of your overall salary cap over the course of the next 5 years, and you figure it out from there. And if you don't think he's the guy, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, you got other options there too. If you don't think he's the guy, pick somebody else. You got that. You got the 8th or 9th pick, and whatever draft equity you can get from Justin Fields. No, I like Fields again. Fantasy quarterback. So, I enjoy him, but you gotta take the stud.
I agree with you. No matter what, you take Caleb Williams, and then you can figure out later what you want to do trade wise or keep him or whatnot. And then the last question I had to you before I transition to our speed round is I thought this was interesting. Comeback player of the year, I felt like had a lot of probably more wide open than any year I can remember. I thought you had a lot of good names. Joe Flacco, here's a guy who was sitting on his couch and the Browns bring him in. He ends up leading Cleveland to the playoffs. You had Baker Mayfield, a guy who I think has actually been hated on, sometimes unfairly, but maybe
Yep.
because more because of his personality. But he really had a bounce back year. And then obviously the heavy favorite going into the year was DeMar Hamlin. People talk about he almost died and he ends up. I think what ultimately did him in because Joe Flacco won the award was that I don't think he played enough. I mean, no one obviously
Yeah.
is taken away from
Yeah.
his comeback, but certainly, I think that I don't think people saw it as fair to guys like Joe Flacco or, in my case, I
Yeah.
thought Baker should have won because he played the whole season. But what did you think about that? And then I guess another way is how do you define comeback? Because some people say,
Yeah.
well, it's an injury, or some people, no, you could have been bad one year and then you come back, have a nice bounce back year. So what was kind of your take on the whole situation? How would you define comeback?
It's tough to say a guy who was dying on the field, was resuscitated, and then came back, didn't deserve it. But you're right. I think he barely played. He did not play a lot, and I think I don't think anybody would have been upset if they gave it to him. But a guy like Joe Flacco, um, like you said, right, was so bad last year, came back, and Baker kind of had a bad year last year, got a little better, or is it a guy like Matt Stafford, right, who got dinged up, right? He was hurt all last year, played, didn't play great, played through some hand injuries and came back and was significantly better this year. I think if you're going to do the Matt Stafford route, you got to be in the MVP conversation, which he wasn't. And so that was an easy write-off. And I think it was between, and I think the same thing with Baker. You didn't play all that well last year, and he played well this year, but they won the worst division in football. And Joe Flacco coming back and doing what he did was impressive. It was really impressive. Um, Fourth quarterback on that team, injuries all up and down the offensive line. That was pretty cool. I'm as an old guy, I'm happy to see that we can still do things.
Well, that's definitely a good way to put it there. Well, Coach, we are over an hour in. You've been so gracious with your time. So to close out the podcast, I've got a few speed round questions to ask you. The first one I wanted to ask was Nick Saban or Bill Belichick. We didn't talk about it specifically, but of course, Nick Saban, the greatest college football coach of all time, retired, and Bill Belichick. I think he'll come back, but obviously at least taking a year
Yeah.
away. Many consider the greatest NFL coach of all time. Whose career would you rather have, Saban or Belichick?
I oh, I think Saban. I think college is just a. I just have that I have that mindset a little bit more. I think the vibes at those games are just way more fun. College football games are I think are it's a when you're winning, right? When you're Nick Saban, the mentality is just a little bit better. I think having young people at the games makes it a lot more fun, whereas you go to an NFL game and it can be a little bit grizzled and old, and people that are drunk at 20 are a little less revolting than people that are 60. So I guess I'll say Nick Saban, but I think a big stain again, if we're talking about GOAT, greatest, I still think I lean Belichick because of how much Saban struggled in the NFL and how poorly he handled things there. When you can recruit, when you're a charismatic guy like that, I think that, obviously he's a great coach, but that does some of the coaching for you when you can do that. But in the NFL where there's a salary cap and guys come and go, I think it's a little bit tougher. So I'd rather have Saban's career, but I think Belichick gets the slight edge.
Yeah, I'm going Belichick. I just think, like you talked about, it's so hard to repeat in the NFL. Salary cap
Yep. Yep.
restrictions. You're coaching grown men who are making more money than you. Nick Saban is pretty much the CEO of his program, and
Yeah.
with NIL, I mean, Alabama's board of visitors, they're going to be able to dish a lot of money. I will give Saban credit though, because I think he was able to adapt in different eras of college football. I mean, he was winning championships with guys like Jake Coker and AJ McCarron, and
Yep.
Greg McElroy. And then by the time he left, he had Tua and Bryce Young and Jalen Milroe, kind of mobile guys. So I
Yeah.
think better
Yep.
than, I think incredibly for his age, he did better than guys like Dabo Sweeney or some of these other guys that
Yeah.
have been able to adjust to the NIL era. And that's probably actually, I think, a reason why he left, because it was going to explode and obviously the 12 team playoff. But
Yeah.
I'm going to lean Belichick. I just think the grown men factor, Super Bowls are really prestigious. I would think I'd rather have Belichick's career, but you can't go wrong because they're both the
No.
goats. So,
No. Yeah.
and so I was curious too. Do you have a favorite sports media guy? Like, you're scrolling through Instagram or social media or YouTube. All of a sudden you
Oh,
just find them. Yeah, you got a sports
yeah.
media guy you love
Oh
watching
yeah,
the
yeah.
tapes.
I'm all Bill Simmons all the time. And so I do a lot of his podcasts. I don't watch the NBA much. I'll put a game on for 10, 15 minutes once a week, but I consume NBA content. I don't know why. I have no interest in baseball. I have no interest in hockey. I don't watch those games at all, but I don't listen to anything about it. But come basketball season, this is like a big time of year for me. I love springtime. I used to coach, and so I used to be driving a lot, and so I listen to podcasts. But between him and Zach Lowe, all the basketball I can get, and I'll watch come playoff time. But yeah, Bill Simmons is definitely my guy.
I'm gonna go Colin Coward. I think that his
Yeah, yeah,
his takes are really good. I think his ability to speak out on social issues occasionally is he's very well well spoken and very just thoughtful in what he says. And then look, I mean, I know he's controversial and I don't always agree with his takes, and he can be annoying at times. But man, Stephen A. Smith has a way of drawing people to hear
oh
what he
yeah,
has to say. And I think First Take. I mean, I look every big game. The next day, I'm looking at First Take, see what
yeah.
those guys say. So I don't know what your thoughts are on Stephen A. Smith, but look, whatever you say about him, he has a way to draw people towards him.
He's good at his job. He's damn good at his job. There's no, I don't, I'm not a big Pat McAfee guy. That's not my cup of tea, but because I don't like him doesn't mean he's not good at his job. Those guys that, sports talk is about, it's kind of like gambling, right? Vegas wants even money on both sides. ESPN wants you to turn on the TV. They don't want you to agree with everybody. And you don't agree with Stephen A all the time, but you agree with him sometime, right? They want you getting pulled in both directions here. And I think Stephen A is the sort of guy that thinks about his craft and delivers it in his own unique way, right? He knows what he's doing. He's good at it. I think Colin Coward's great. I think he's a smart guy. I think a single man booth like he does is impressive. And then I would like to say at the very bottom, my least favorite person is Skip Bayless. I hate him. So I know that wasn't the question, but I don't like him at all.
I will say, I mean, again, I don't agree with everything he says, but I don't know if you've caught some of his Skip Bayless podcast clips. He's talked about his
Uh,
family, his upbringing. I mean, I think
yep.
it's humanized him a little bit. I feel like I
Right.
like him a little bit more than maybe I did before he started doing this
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. I think I'm sure I should check it out, but he seems committed to the take for the sake of the take rather than that he truly believes in it. And so like some of his stuff on LeBron James is just as tired as it gets. And so that he, this stuff on the Cowboys, it's very tired in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, obviously he's a person. If I met him, I'd begin to appreciate him a little bit more. But he puts himself out in a way that is meant to make you feel something, and I'm happy to oblige.
I'm curious. I've always wanted to ask you this question because you've coached both sports. What is a harder sport to coach, basketball or lacrosse?
Um, I think lacrosse has more nuance. Goaltending and face-offs, I struggle with. I don't know those as well as I do the rest of the sport. But I still think hoops is a harder sport to coach just because there's more great coaches out there. Lacrosse is still such a niche sport in so many places that the opportunities to coach little kids, the opportunities, it's just a harder sport to cross the threshold to get into coaching. It's hard to get 20 kids together to play on a lacrosse team. It's hard to they're just not the leagues that there are. Whereas basketball, I could coach basketball year round, both my kids, and you know, you see all these coaches out there, and it's challenging. I know what I want to do, and I know the way that I want to get it across, but um there's a lot more basketball coaches that are that way too than there are lacrosse coaches.
I'm curious. You're a big Syracuse guy. You bleed the orange through and through. What are your thoughts on this kind of new era of Syracuse athletics? A new coach in football and basketball. You've got Adrian Autry. They just
Yeah.
had a big win against North Carolina a couple days ago. Congrats on that. And Fran Brown will be the new head coach come fall. So, what are your thoughts on kind of this new era for Syracuse sports?
It's been nice with Red. He's a guy that, not exactly like what we talked about with the Patriots, but similar, right? Somebody who's been in the program for years. We knew who Red was. He was a great ball player when he played for us. He's been a great recruiter for Coach Boeheim. Coach Boeheim stayed a little past his prime. And we were sad to see him go, but it was definitely time for him to leave. And so he's had his run-ins, one of our top recruit of the last 5 years, he removed from the team. And, I don't know the inside story, but the guy had Benny Williams, a miserable body language, was a lazy defender. For a guy his size, didn't rebound. And so to see him sort of say, this is my program and this is what the expectations are, I hope they make the NCAA tournament. This is the time of year where you get your kids to love the game, right? I can turn it on and we'll watch it on a Saturday afternoon and they enjoy it, but there is other stuff's going on. But you get that first close game on a Friday evening, or that first round of 32 or round of 8 on a Sunday afternoon, and I still remember those games. I still remember Q Speed in Georgia. I still remember them getting to the Final Four when I was 12. And that's what I hope for. And I was spoiled. I had really good Q's teams, football and basketball, when I was a kid. And it's tough. My son is, Mrs. Curtin's a Michigan person, and so she's actually a Michigan State fan, but the family is all Michigan people. And come football season, he only watched Michigan games. He wouldn't really watch Q's games with me much at all because they stink, and Michigan was good. I think Fran Brown brought in a ton of transfer talent. I'll be excited to see it. Can't wait to see how he coaches. Certainly has a knack for getting the right guys in. And like we said, you get the right guys in, they go out and make some plays. Got Ohio State's quarterback coming in, playing for us. Number of wide receivers coming out of Georgia coming up and playing for us. And we got a soft schedule. So, 9-3, 10-2, not totally out of the realm of possibility with the players we brought in. And if he gets things going in the right direction, I'd love to start rooting for Q's football fanatically again. They just haven't given us much reason over the last couple of years.
I have to ask you though, what happened on October 26th, that Thursday night game in Blacksburg? I mean, you disarmed me. You didn't. You were like they were gonna
Billy,
lose, and
Billy, you're fading out here. Yeah, my buddy and I were thinking about going, and I can't believe I'm going to say this. Luckily, I got COVID like 3 weeks earlier,
Wow.
and so I had to take a full week off. And we were going to do Thursday night, Friday, go to the game, and I was like, I can't do it. I just took a week. I can't make it. And man, turn that. I had something else going on earlier that evening, and I turned the game on. It was like, oh my Lord, I am glad I didn't drive 4 hours down to Blacksburg.
Well, you guys will have your chance for a rematch because November 2nd, Tech goes up to Syracuse. So, looking forward to that on the schedule. But, Coach, I always
So,
like to tie in your, being a history teacher. I know we've had some great conversations before to close out the podcast, and I wanted to ask you this question. And to be fair to you, I did not give you this question in advance, so it might be
okay.
hard to think on
I'm
the fly.
nervous. You've got
Yeah,
me nervous here.
yeah. So I'll give you my answer here, and then maybe that might help you bounce off some ideas. So, who would you want at your dinner table? Like, so let's just say you have 5 spots, and you could, bring in any sort of historical figure. Who would be the 5 people you'd bring into your dinner table? Again, I know it's a hard question on the fly, but maybe to give you some ideas, I'll give you my 5 here. So I would say MLK and Malcolm X. I just think the way they approached, we've talked about it before, but the civil rights era is one of my favorite eras of history to study. The way they both had different approaches to the civil rights era, I'd love to have them
Hmm.
there to be able to
Yep.
chat about how they approached it. I'd also go FDR and Lincoln. I think that they were presidents at I mean, incredible times in our history. When you talk about Lincoln with the Civil War, the country was on the brink of separation, and then FDR when you talk about the Great Depression and World War II. So I'd have those two guys, and then my last guy would be Jackie Robinson. I mean, the guy that really broke the color barrier, obviously in baseball, but that opened up the door for other sports. So I would say those 5 guys: MLK, Malcolm X, FDR, Lincoln, and Jackie Robinson. Do you have 5 you can think of off the top of your
I'm
head that
gonna
you?
have a hard time narrowing it down to five, and those are all excellent choices. I love the sports specific. I'm gonna branch out a little bit outside of the US. I think I'm gonna start first with Muhammad. I the idea of meeting one of these like significant religious leaders, right? Whether it's Jesus or, but from everything I've studied, Jesus was very, very religious, and in his faith only blossomed after his passing, whereas Muhammad played a pretty impressive role in the development of his religion and then the early spreading of it. And so I think that is something that I'd be interested in learning about. I think somebody like Da Vinci lived through the Renaissance. Um, Somebody who could talk about a number of things, right? Was a um, obviously an artist, but scientist, and those. That's the sort of, I need a little bit of rounding out to our conversation. I have a feeling Muhammad will be very heavy. Um, I know that it is still problematic with the fact that he owned slaves, but I would want George Washington. I would want to talk to him. The role that he played both in the foundation of our country militarily and then the founding of our nation politically is something that I would want to talk about. I got to agree with you. I think Martin Luther King would be wonderful to talk to. He just seemed thoughtful and powerful and positive, even under the most pressing of circumstances, to find the ability to he wasn't dishonest, right? He wasn't um naive about what was happening, but the ability to sort of use his faith as a method for bringing about change. That's four. This is going to be a sappy answer, but I miss my father. I would love to see my dad one more time.
Oh, that's awesome for sure. And I'm curious too, because we are kind of an election year. I was curious, do you have an opinion on who the greatest president of all time is? I mean, you look at it. I think obviously some names that you throw out there. George Washington, you mentioned. I mean,
Mhm.
he founded the country, and obviously he was there. He chose not to be a king, and that's where we had this tradition
Yeah.
of 2 terms.
Yep.
FDR, of course, for his leadership in Great Depression and World War II. Abraham Lincoln for keeping the Union together through the Civil War. Teddy Roosevelt's up there, Thomas Jefferson. So, if you had an opinion, I mean, who do you think is the greatest president in our history?
Um, we got a lot, right? We've got a number from both sides of the spectrum, right? You look at Washington was non-party affiliated, right? Was not somebody that believed in political parties. And you see guys like Adams and Jefferson who had different visions for the country, right? A more agrarian versus a more centralized. And I guess it's easier to look back at that time through rose-colored glasses and appreciate what they did. But there was a lot of backbiting and a lot of political scheming that was going on. But I think the choice for me is the one that you choose as well as FDR. I think that the role that he played in shepherding our country through the Great Depression, he didn't solve it, but he certainly um, did his best to try and bring comfort to a country that was struggling, and then to sort of on top of that, then lead our country through the largest war in the history of the world, and sort of find a way to harness the might of our country in a fashion that um, allows us to come out of that as the world power was something that um, you know he should be recognized for and appreciated for. It is um, he had to toe a very uncomfortable line for the first couple of years of that war, and he did that. He balanced it well, and then once the war began, just like he had during the Depression, he was a communicator, somebody with a vision, somebody who trusted people that were his underlings to go out and execute their job, just like our school's namesake, George C. Marshall, right? He brings in the best people and lets them make decisions to bring about change. And so, yeah, I've got FDR.
Although, coach, I would have to say, I think one guy, and again, he gets, I think, rightfully criticized, for his escalation of the Vietnam War. But I think when you look at Lyndon Johnson, I think
Yep.
America today is
Hmm.
more Lyndon Johnson's America than it is maybe any other president in modern history. When you think about all the, the Great Society programs, Medicare, and of course, civil rights, the key legislations he signed. He knew the way of the Senate. He was a longtime senator. He was able to get
Yep.
his legislation passed. I think, look, I mean, obviously Vietnam is what it is, but I think, I've become fascinated with Lyndon Johnson. I think he's one of my favorite presidents, and I think America as it is owes a lot to Lyndon Johnson for what he was able to do as president.
That's well said, right? All the civil rights acts that were passed under his leadership, things like Title IX, right? These are a reflection of what he did. Yeah, it's just all of the work that he did with the civil rights acts, in terms of trying to bring about more fair representation through voting. We see Title IX, but also the bad as well. The way race continues to play to shape the political parties of our country started under him, right? The Southern strategy begins after the election of '68, and so yeah, Johnson. That's a great choice too.
Coach, this has been such a pleasure getting to catch up as always to
Yeah,
talk about
absolutely.
the NFL and big picture, and obviously sprinkling as always the history and some of your other passions. It's great that we've kind of got this tradition going. Thanks so much for joining me, and let's do it again in August. Looking forward to it.
Can't wait, Billy. I hope you enjoy your summer, and we'll catch up soon.
Well, thank you so much to my ninth grade history teacher at George C. Marshall High School, Kevin Curtin, for joining me, former high school lacrosse and basketball coach as well. We talked about all sorts of things, NFL and kind of big picture as we move into the offseason here. Thanks again to Coach Curtin for joining me. This has been the latest edition of the Post with BP. I'm your host, Billy Parvatam. We'll see you next time.